Hey everyone, I am so delighted to have Sarah Ross join us today. Now, Sarah started working in the health and wellness world in 2012 with a passion to help others become the best version of themselves. Now, she struggled with an eating disorder for most of her young life and used those destructive patterns to mask the pain of trauma and not feeling like she was good enough. She knows exactly how it feels to look in the mirror and not love what you see. And she knows how exhausting it is when you're doing so much and you're on your way to burnout. Now, Sarah is inspired to help women to gain awareness of these patterns that have kept them stuck. She believes that through coaching and training, you will find a safe place to become the woman you were created to be, without judgment or shame, and you will learn to love your body, fuel your mind, and nurture your soul. I'm so happy that you're with us, Sarah.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
I was able to talk with your mom earlier, and she told me a little bit more of your story that you never told me the first time around.
Yeah.
And wow, folks, Sarah's got an amazing story. And I love her topic, destructive patterns that mask the pain. Now, we've all got patterns in our life, absolutely. Some of us are here because we need to shed a few pounds. Other people have to gain a few pounds. I was talking to one lady and she needed to gain weight so that she could conceive better. So everybody is on a different journey. And so whatever reason you're here today to listen, I know that Sarah can be part of that story. So I'm really, really interested, and I know everyone else is, about your story, about those destructive patterns that mask the pain. So tell us more about that.
All right. Well, again, I am so very glad to be here. And like Daryl was saying, we all have patterns in our life. Most of the time, we are not really sure why. And when I was younger, I struggled with an eating disorder, and I knew that was kind of where I was escaping to, but I didn't really understand the why behind all of it. And so that was something that controlled a lot of my life moving forward into my young adult life. And it wasn't until I was able to look at that, there was trauma, which we all experience trauma in some way. That word can sometimes feel a little scary or harsh, or we feel like, oh, well, I don't have something that's bad enough to be considered trauma. But it's anything traumatic that literally stops us in our tracks. And I had someone tell me a long time ago that for me, having trauma as a kid, he said, kids are amazing observers and awful interpreters. And I feel like that can go into being an adult as well. We observe these things that may happen to us, but we don't always know how to interpret why or the effect that they have on us. So for me, I had these patterns in my world, and it was just masking the initial pain of that trauma I experienced as a kid. And so until I was able to uncover what that was and deal with those issues, the patterns continued. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so crazy. One big thing for me, I used to perform on stage, and I shared my story one day, which I'd never done before. I hadn't talked much about the eating disorder and the body image issues that I struggled with. And as I started to share my story and be vulnerable, other people were impacted. I believe that we are so impacted when we hear stories and we share, we can find connecting pieces that we have with other people. And at the same time, it was so healing for me to allow those things to come out and to be honest about where I had been and where I came through. And it honestly has led me into how much passion I have now in the health and wellness world, because I wanted to take that aspect of my story and that hardship and turn it into something that I could help people, which is where I'm working with women now, uncovering their own patterns from their traumas or things that happened to them, or maybe things that they experienced, and being able to recognize those patterns and to figure out why they continue to recur. Because that's usually what happens. For me, the eating disorder, it was just a result of something else. That wasn't the main, it was like a symptom of the actual sickness that was going on.
Right.
So
now I understand that you're a bit of a child star.
As a part of the story in there. Yep.
Part of the story in
Mm-hmm.
there. Yeah. Her and her sister
Yep.
sing. And I can't wait to hear some videos of that, because your mom says your harmony is just, when you get three sisters harmonizing, I can just imagine,
There's
right?
something beautiful that happens.
Just the similarities in the voice and all. Anyways, my wife and I used to sing in
That's
churches
awesome.
and couples retreats and all that for many
Mhm.
years. So that's part of our story and part of our
Mhm.
heart. But yeah, so experiencing this at a young age, you had mentioned that kids don't know how to interpret
Mhm.
it. And a lot of us are here today. We might be over 40, and we want to see transformation in our
Mhm.
life. And it starts with us, absolutely, right? When we start looking at ourselves, start changing ourselves, I think there's a trickle effect that happens throughout our whole family. But what's interesting is even children are affected by trauma and eating disorders and mindset issues and stuff like that. So that happened at a very young age. What was it like for you to go through that process in terms of, like, was it a couple of years or a few years? And so many of us think we can do it on our own.
We cannot. Yeah.
I don't think we can, right? So what did that look like for you?
Well, so I was 13 years old whenever I finally said, I need help. I can't do this by myself. And I went and lived at a treatment center for 2 months in Arizona. And so my personality is, I understand this so much better now as an adult, but I very much think that I am only valuable or worthwhile based on what I do or what I offer. I had a really hard time as a kid feeling like I was good enough or I was doing enough. And so when I went to this treatment center, I had learned early on, and it's so crazy too, because the patterns that we learn to mask the pains that we experience, they look different for everybody. And I think that's based on personality. It's based on upbringing, things that we have access to. But for me, I learned one of the masks that I had was a literal mask of acting like I was fine, to the point where when I was in that treatment center, I have journals still from when I would just journal, and I lived there for 2 months, and I had convinced myself that I was well enough to be on my own, to leave and to go back to my normal life. And I mean, even convinced a lot of the people there that were that were therapists. And I had one therapist that did not believe me. He was like, I still don't think that you truly are okay yet on your own, because we're not meant to be on our own. And so for me, that was something when I came home from that treatment center, I felt like I had to keep up, again, this image that I was okay and I was pushing through and I was strong and determined. And so if I had any kind of setback, I was afraid to share that with people, because I felt like, again, I wasn't good enough. And so those patterns continued, I mean, well into my young adult life. And they got better. And then I would fall back into the same kind of pattern. Because I feel like we can have awareness of a pattern, but that doesn't mean that we can fully learn how to change it. And so for me, I would take a bunch of steps forward, and then I would take steps back. And through that journey, I really fell in love with movement. And I tried to learn how to fuel myself well, but I still had this mindset of not loving my own skin, and also thinking that there were foods that were good or there were foods that were bad. And that continued to keep me stuck in that mindset. And I fully believe that there's a way to fuel yourself well, and God made real foods and things from the earth. But also as a teenager, again, I wasn't interpreting well the fact that there still was pain from when I was a kid. And I feel like when we experience trauma, we get stuck there. And so the loop continues, and we can be great and we're going about our life. We feel like we're in these routines and we're taking care of ourselves. And then something happens and it re-triggers the trauma from the past. And
Right.
so
Right.
that continues that loop. And it could be, a few days that go by, it can be years that go by. And so it wasn't until I was in, I mean, my early 20s that I really started doing the work of digging into that trauma and talking about it and letting go of some of those things that I had held on to that I thought was my fault, that wasn't. And through that, uncovering, which is so hard and it's uncomfortable because we want to keep things buried and we want to look like we have it all together. But for me, I got to the point where I was like, I'm not actually moving forward. And I really want to move forward and I want to be well. And so that started this journey for me of having that awareness and that recognition of some of these things that had happened, taking ownership in my own part of those patterns, because we are the common denominator in our stories. That doesn't mean things don't happen to us. It doesn't mean we don't do things, but we are the common denominator. So I started to, again, uncover those patterns that kept me stuck. And it opened up this whole world of freedom. And which is why, again, the program that I go through with women, I'm so passionate about focusing on the mind and the body and the soul, the health of all three, because for so much of my life, I only focused on my body. And I was obsessed with how I looked. I was obsessed with how I ate. I was obsessed with trying to control so I didn't have to deal with the pain.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so
I have a question about the destructive patterns in terms of sometimes we don't even see them. Other people do, but we don't. And I think part of taking a step forward is being real with yourself, telling yourself the truth. But what do you do if you want transformation? You don't know where to start. You realize, okay, maybe I do have some destructive patterns, but what are they? How do I discover what they might be? Can I do that on my own, or is this an exercise I need to do with someone else that's close to me, who's willing to be real? I don't know. What do you think?
I fully believe we are not meant to do life alone. And yet we try so hard to do that. And we think we're supposed to have it together before we present ourselves to someone else. And that, for me, with my personality, was what I was doing. And it wasn't until I was honest with myself and then honest with other people. And then, because I kind of was like, again, you can have awareness, but that doesn't mean you have the tools to change. And so how do we do that? You can research all the things online, but having a community or having a person that you feel safe with, that there was a something that we did when I was at that treatment center, and they called it Truth and Love. And it was this whole family week. My family came in and we basically spoke our truth, but in love. And so I highly recommend to people, when you get to that place where you go, I know I have patterns. I know there's this continual loop that I'm going through. I don't know how to do that. Find someone that you trust, that you know is going to meet you without judgment and is going to meet you with love, but also with that truth, because that's important. Sometimes we're afraid to hear the truth, because with that comes the responsibility of doing something.
And it's tough, because sometimes when you're working with somebody that's been in extreme denial for so long, now they want to discover their truths. When someone when you ask them, hey, I want you to be raw with me, and then suddenly they are, and then you bounce back with, yeah, but you have this wrong in your life, and this and this and this and this.
Yep. Oh yeah, we all do that. Oh, for sure.
It's just like human reaction, right?
Yeah, we're defending ourselves.
Exactly. So it's good to know that, when we get into these meaningful discussions, that at times we have to kind of ignore the emotions that come up around it, because they're knee-jerk reactions and we don't necessarily mean them, but they're just there because of safety. We're trying to protect ourselves. right? It's difficult, absolutely
I
difficult.
had somebody tell me one time about that. They were like, if you can enter into a relationship with people that you love and you trust and that you
Yeah,
want to know you well, if you can enter into that without thinking that they are against you, you can actually
yeah,
have a conversation. And hopefully the other person feels the same way. It's when we feel like this person is going to attack me, we're constantly on the defense. And that's where I was at
yeah,
when I started trying to be honest with people. I mean, I was coming from my personality is really outgoing and bubbly, and so I always seemed like I was fine. But then when someone tried to go deep with me, I would shut down,
mm-hmm.
and I would literally. I mean, sometimes so crazy.
Divert,
Oh
squirrel.
yeah, thinking about this now, I would like stare off at the wall and like emotionally disconnect because I was so
Yeah,
disconnected from how I felt internally. And so I tell people all the time, it's a practice. It's not
yeah,
something like you don't have an expectation that you decide I want to transform myself. I want to change these patterns. There's not a like it happens overnight because
yeah,
the time that we have been living in that trauma or the pain or the destructive patterns is usually a long time. And so that doesn't just disappear. There's a lot to uncover. There's a lot to be honest about. And the more that we practice that, the easier it gets to have that vulnerability.
yeah. You know, as a coach, when I talk to clients, uh, I have no agenda. You know, I'm not really close to them, and that's where the safety is in a coach because you know what, whatever's said, mom's the
Mm-hmm.
word. It's not going to go anywhere. So there's that era of safety. But sometimes they'll say something, and already I know that this is a destructive pattern, or so I'll ask a question that's so outside of their realm, it causes them to have like a pregnant pause,
Mm-hmm.
as I
Yep.
call it. And it's like, oh my goodness, I never thought of that
Yeah.
before. And so I'm sitting there on the edge of my seat, hoping that their answer or what they get from it is, you know, I'm not directing them, so I just give an answer, but I'm kind of hoping they're going to go in a positive direction. And all of a sudden they'll come up with something that has nothing to do with what I
Yep.
thought it would
Yep.
do with. And it's like, okay, well, that's okay. We just get another coaching session together.
Yeah, we'll try again next time.
but seriously, it's like peeling the
Oh
onion,
yeah.
isn't it? I mean,
Yep.
little layer by
Yep.
layer, and eventually people will figure it out on their own. And that's where coaches come
Mm-hmm.
in. Is we're not there to peel your onion. We're there to hold you capable to peel your own
Mm-hmm.
onion. And some people, they do it rather quickly. Other people, it takes a long time.
Does. Yeah, I have been working in the fitness world. I'm a fitness trainer, and I've been doing that now for 10 years. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so interesting because when I entered into the training, I realized I'm showing up in people's houses a few days a week, some 5 days a week, some 2 days a week. And with the
Yeah.
training, if I don't show up, usually they don't move until they see me the next time. And so when I transitioned into coaching, I realized I was like, oh, this is so different because my desire is to get people to the place where they do it on their own. And it's
Yeah.
different. It's a different kind of accountability. It's a different kind of encouragement, inspiration, but ultimately it's just a safe space for people to take the time that they need to get to the place that they want to be. And I mean, like you said, it looks
Right.
different for everybody, but it really is peeling one layer. Because I'll do the same thing. I'll be like, okay, here's this thought or here's this question, and I'll be waiting. And then I'll be like, I remember the times that someone did that for me, and I wasn't ready
Yeah.
yet to recognize that thing
Yeah.
or to take ownership or
Yeah.
to change. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the beauty of it. We all have our own story and our own time frame of healing and our journey of whatever wellness you are trying to attain. But it takes time.
It takes
Mhm.
time, and my onion is still not
Oh,
fully
me
peeled.
neither. Oh yeah, I find new
I don't think any of us
right.
are.
Oh,
It's a life
it
journey,
is.
right?
Mhm. Yep, it
Yeah.
is. Which is honestly, it
Wow.
keeps us though. I mean, I think that's why community is so important because with the
Yeah.
coaching that I do with women, it's group coaching, and I'll watch them realize like, oh, I'm not alone in the way that I feel. And even with me as a coach, there's moments where someone in the group shares their story and it'll like hit a part of my story. And I'll be like, I fully understand. And these are still things that I am processing through, or I'm in my own road to wellness. I'm moving through, because we never fully arrive. We just continue to gain tools and awareness and hopefully keep growing.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And we never stop growing. You could be 95 years old. You could be like Betty White, lived to almost 100. Mm-hmm. I'm sure if she was still alive, she would say, hey, you never stop learning.
Never. Yeah. Right? I think when we do, that's when things get a little scary.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, really what we need to do is take a moment, pause, and go, okay, what destructive patterns do we have in our own life? What are the masks that we're wearing? So often, we get out in public and we look one way, but when we're at home, our family sees something entirely different. Mm-hmm. We want to be authentic. And I think the world appreciates authentic people. But, we still have to be caring. We still have to, get along with one another.
Yep.
So, we don't want to be so authentic that, we're like sandpaper.
For sure.
Right. So there's community and there's living in community. Right. So you're going to be buying your groceries with someone that you're not going to share your life story with. But we do definitely need to be in a journey together with someone.
Yes. Oh, right? I totally agree. I think there's so much power in that. I mean, I know that there's pivotal moments in my life of realizations, and sometimes they happen with me and God. I wasn't alone. It wasn't just me. Sometimes it's me and someone close to me that loved me enough to be honest. But all of those moments, I wasn't alone. I was in some kind of community or just with someone else. And so I think that part, it's why I love group coaching. I mean, it's different. It's uncomfortable when you first start it, because a lot of times people will sign up for the group that I have, and it's like, I know I'm here to make some changes, but that means I have to actually show people where I'm at, because you have to know where you are to know where you want to go. And
absolutely,
sometimes I feel like, again, we think we have to put on, like you were saying, this face of perfection, but at the same time, we admire people that are real and that are authentic, and we desire that so much. And so I think it's why it's so important to figure out why we are the way that we are, not just who we are. Like, some personality tests will be like, well, this is who you are. It's like, okay, but why do I do those things? Like, what is the driving factor? What's my motivation for doing those things? Because then we can usually shift patterns once we figure out that why. So, and I also think too, I start with, I do the mind, body, soul with my coaching, and I start with the mind aspect, because mindset it's so important. And we could start with the body, get you into a fitness routine and eating better. But if your mindset hasn't shifted, we usually don't continue in those healthy patterns.
Yeah, no sustainability. Yeah. Something that came to my mind was, in terms of destructive patterns, like we have one of our speakers, Danya Douglas Hunt. She used to train Olympic athletes, and her sessions about inner dragons. She had made a comment about slaying your dragon or training your dragon, because sometimes these destructive patterns, we think they're slain, but really they're not. They'll come back and haunt us at some other point in life, or it might be a continuous journey. So would you agree that, sometimes it's a matter of training the dragon versus slaying it?
It's something that I actually talk about a lot, because I feel like there is an expectation that if I'm moving in this journey of taking care of myself, all the bad things are supposed to go away. Like, the parts of myself I don't like, that I struggle with, should be gone. But that expectation is unrealistic, because I love that. It is training those dragons, because the reality is we all have patterns that we come back to based on personality, based on upbringing, based on the way we view the world, value systems.
Trauma.
It's just, it's training them and learning. And I do this thing, or I have people do this thing where it's like, if you have a negative pattern pop up or a thought that pops up that's continual, to just stop in a moment, journal down that negative, and then put next to it the truth. And just continue to do that. You might not believe the truth part for a long time, but that's that practice. It's that training of that dragon. So eventually, it doesn't mean the negative thought won't pop up. It doesn't mean something happens in your life and you fall back into an unhealthy pattern. It just means you can see it and have awareness and know what the truth is, or know where you can take yourself to because you've been there.
Right.
And so, it's a continual. I think we have to be aware of those patterns, because when we're not, we can wake up and be like, I know that for me with the eating disorder, when I was younger, I would think that I was fine and I would just kind of ignore the little indicators that I was slipping back. And then I would be backwards. And I would go, how did I get here? And so it's, training those dragons, knowing that it's not going to fully ever be gone, but you can get to a space where you are in control of those things.
Exactly. I like it. And, when the dragons poke their little head up, that's probably the time to get online with your support group or with your coach, and just be brutally honest and say, hey, I woke up this morning, little dragon A popped his head up. This is how I'm feeling. I mean, we can't ignore our feelings, right? Because we've got all these chemicals running through our body. And as we're making our transformation, eating better, different things, we're going to be having a lot of stuff going on, right? Things that are somewhat out of our control, because they will get into control, but it takes time, right? So sharing with people that, hey, I'm having a problem, and they just support you and say, hey, listen, you can do it. I know you can do it. I'll put a little prayer up for you, whatever. We need that. We really need that, right?
Sometimes I honestly think, depending on where we are in our world, sometimes that's really all that we need, is to voice it. And then to go, okay, and then have a support system, which is so important, because again, trying to do it on your own, we just keep falling back, and then we just hate ourselves more because we're back in a pattern, and we're so negative to ourselves. The way we talk to ourselves can be terrible sometimes. We would never talk to someone else the way we talk to ourselves. And so, I think that as soon as that comes up, you go to somebody and you're like, hey, this was a thought, this was a struggle. I just needed to say it.
Yeah. Telling yourself the truth. Hey, folks, don't suffer in silence. There's no need for that. There's so many people out there who are passionate about helping people just like you. Sarah's one of them. We've got 19 or 20 speakers that all feel the same way as I do. And so we're at the end of our time, Sarah. I can't believe it. Oh, my goodness. Time flies. Anyway, listen, everyone that's attending the summit, Sarah's going to give you something as a free gift. So what is that, Sarah?
Okay, so it's 5 essentials for a healthy mind, body, and soul. And so it's kind of walking through some of the things that you can add into your routine. They're super easy to add in. That just helps you on that journey, on your own road to wellness.
Awesome. And then one person that's attending the live summit is going to get a free gift from you as well. What is that?
So exciting. Whoever you are, I'm stoked to meet you. We're going to do it'll be a 30-minute session with me, kind of like this. And we're going to do a wellness assessment and then a little workout together.
Awesome. Yeah. This is exciting.
Yes, I'm excited.
I'm so happy that you could spend time with us, Sarah. And I'm so happy that all of you spent some time with us today as well. And Sarah, until next time.
Thank you, Daryl.
Everyone have a wonderful afternoon or morning or whatever it is, wherever you are, because, I don't know who's watching this from anywhere in the world. So bless you all.